Single I salute. I'm Lord Maitreya, the hip hop futurist. You're now tuned into the Super Longevity Institute podcast. This evening, I have a very special guest. Early in his career, he produced creative assets for names just like IBM, Microsoft, and Styx, and have creative consulted for good works like the Gandhi Worldwide Education Institute and Sir Bob Jildov's ubloom.com. While director of marketing for an internet firm, he testified before Congress in support of the anti-spam bill. Soon thereafter, the governor of California appointed him to a Department of Consumer Affairs board. His novel US 6 is designed to entertain, enlighten, and enlist human and artificial superintelligent readers into the fight against modern slavery. This research led him to becoming the director of sentient rights advocacy in the U.S. Transhumanist Party and chief partnership officer for TAFT, an African-based futurist think tank. Ladies and gentlemen, hip hop futurist transhumanist worldwide, AI metaphysician and author Tom Royce. Welcome to the Institute, Mr. Royce. It's a pleasure to
Thanks
have
for
you.
having me. I appreciate
Wow,
this.
man. What? All right. When I was doing my homework on you, I seen that you had a program called Unearthed. Is that right? Is that the name of the program?
Yeah, a show that we taped out of Los Angeles and simulcast to different universities at
Wow.
the time. This was in the 90s, and
Wow.
at the time I was working for Marilyn Ferguson, who was the author of the Aquarian Conspiracy, the Brain Revolution, and she published the Brain Mind Bulletin, kind of leading edge neuroconsciousness studies. And knowing her, her book, The Aquarian Conspiracy, did pretty well. It
It's so
wasn't
fly.
it wasn't about astrology. It was about as a political book, really.
Right.
And um, so working for her and with her for so many years put me in touch with these luminaries like Robert Anton Wilson and Tim Leary
Wow.
and that whole tribe of people. And yeah, so Unearthed, I was able to grab a few and bring them into the studio and actually interview them.
Wait.
Um,
You interviewed Timothy Leary, man?
no, not Tim, but
Oh,
Robert
okay.
Anton Wilson, Marilyn Ferguson,
Oh,
Michael
okay.
Talbot.
Oh, this still
Um,
well. You still ain't doing bad right there. I mean,
I,
what was
I
it?
did I did work with Tim Leary though. I did
Oh, okay.
know him and work with him, helped him with
Wow.
some stuff. Um, yeah, so that was the tribe of people I was lucky enough to hang with in the 90s. And so I did a few shows
What
um,
was
with
Timothy
those.
Leary like? And can you tell my
He,
audience who Timothy Leary is? Because they might not know.
yeah, I mean, I think he's best known, unfortunately, for tune in, turn on, and drop out. The whole kind of counterculture, LSD counterculture in the 60s. He was a Harvard professor
Yeah.
and actually broke out of prison. His story is amazing. He broke out of prison twice just by being clever and climbing on things. It's an intense story. But anyway, he was an author and futurist and professor and just a really counterculture leader of the time, Dr. Timothy Leary. And when I knew him, he was already getting into his 70s and met him first at John Lilly's party. John Lilly was a researcher
He's
who I've always been fascinated with. But anyway, this is the type of people that working for and with Marilyn Ferguson
wow.
brings you in circles with. And another was Michael Talbot, who we've talked about, the Holographic Universe.
Yeah.
I was able to do an interview with him and just capture these people and the
Wow.
kind of at the frontier, at the beginning of that whole movement, really, the
Wow.
latest version of it.
Wow. Well, first off, the Korean conspiracy sold when I worked at East West Books here in New York. That sold off the shelves. That and the
Yeah.
holographic universe. I had both books, by the way. Um, can you tell my audience what the holographic universe was about?
Well, it worked. Brought and there's actually a 15-minute interview I can share with you later,
Oh, wonderful.
where he explains it. He kind of really goes into great detail, but it's really just pulling from Pribram's and these other uh, quantum physicists, theoretical physicists, concept of the uh, universe being set up like a hologram, and that the whole could be found in each part of it. And that's actually the latest version of the latest model that we use for the brain. It's not so much right and left anymore. It's more of a holographic model, holonomic model. And so they kind of relate that. It's there's another leader in this whole movement that he pulls from, that's whose name is escaping me, but it's basically seeing that this, well, everything we're perceiving, this reality, is a 3D projection of like a hologram. It's made up of
Wow.
interference patterns, and you can find, it's like as above so below. You can find the whole universe in a single part of it, if
Right.
you use the right parameters of measurement or whatever that is. So I think that's the message that came through from the ancients, was the as above so below. That's what they're talking
Definitely.
about, that holographic universe.
Wow. Is he still around? I would like to get in contact. Is he
Michael
still?
Talbot.
Yeah.
No, unfortunately, he died not too long in the 90s,
That's
not
the
too long
second
after I.
person.
Yeah, he was very young, and he had gotten some sort of disease, I can't recall. But, yeah, so it was really lucky to meet him right before he
Wow.
really, uh, checked out. But, yeah, he had an interesting life, a lot of interesting paranormal experiences. We talked about a couple in that interview. He was working on a book about, I don't wanna say vampires, because
Mm,
that wouldn't have done it justice, but he was very active, and
wow.
just a great mind, very kind man too.
Wow. What was the anti-spam bill about? Cause I.
Oh, well, I had the opportunity. I had a friend that I grew up with who went the whole political route and knew how I felt about this new trend of spam. I was a director of marketing at the time at an internet company, one of the early internet companies that serviced radio specifically. And I had the opportunity to come represent the private sector, as a marketing director, who, although I understood the benefits of using spam, the wider the net, and this was in the early days, you could still get away with this stuff. More people would you'd get, but I decided at the time that as long as I was director of marketing of this firm, I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't use spam, because we were just learning about the power of permission marketing. And
Uh,
Seth Godin was kind of, his stuff was becoming gospel, and so I was able to put permission marketing into the congressional record in my testimony there by advocating uh, for this anti-spam bill, to kind of put restrictions on the way people can spam you. In fact, out of this subcommittee came the easy and quick ability it is to unsubscribe to something.
mm,
That's got to be always at the bottom. It's got to be very easy to do. You can't, you've got, so I take personal pride in that, and making the unsubscribe um,
yeah.
link mandatory, just for my own purposes. But that was kind of my entry into politics. Um,
Wow.
and around that time, I was also appointed by the governor of California to a consumer affairs board, as you mentioned in that um, opening. And that was with geologists and geophysicists. They needed a
Mm,
public seat, somebody to come in who was appointed to sit in and as a member of the public. And
mm,
so that was a very interesting thing, because it was kind of the go between the environmentalists and the geologists, and there was an interesting
mm,
kind of uh, conflict that happens there. It'd make a great sitcom.
mm,
But yeah, so I've always kind of kept my interest in politics, and then it's also moved now to being a officer in the U.S. Transhumanist Party, as you mentioned,
mm.
as the director of sentient rights advocacy, which means I
Important too.
concern myself with the latest studies and uh, opportunities to discuss and form policy around the ideas of levels of sentience, from animals on up to AI at some point. And
Mm,
yeah, and that really ties in well with my novel.
wow.
Um, so yeah,
So what? All right. So because when you really don't, it's like you put AI and metaphysician together. It's you really don't see those two words combined like that. So you definitely have to explain that. I think it's
yeah.
creative. I like it.
Well, it's funny because I put a list of it. It was almost done tongue in cheek because
Mm,
somebody had asked me for a bio to do this talk that I did in Kigali, Rwanda,
mm,
October 2019,
mm,
and I threw in a bunch of different bios for them to choose from, and that was one that they chose, and with a
mm.
couple of others. And I almost took it out because I had just come back from doing that talk at Microsoft with David Kelly, his whatever conference there
Mhm.
about this. And so to start bringing the word metaphysician into having talked to all these scientists and AI developers and whatnot, uh, uh, I thought about it. You know what? I wrote a book that is designed to entice awareness, self-awareness in an AI.
Right.
I use the hermetic principles of correspondence, as above, so below, and that's a very
Right.
big theme in it. I put mathematically devised plot points based on Fibonacci and different, fractal equations in there.
Yes.
I said, you know what? I'm a fucking AI metaphysician. You know, I
Incredible.
had to cop to it. So I went with it, and it works. It makes sense because it's
It
kind of what I'm
does.
trying to do.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so it was good to just throw that out there, have somebody call me on it, and I just decided, yeah, look, that's what I am. It was I was
Um.
hiding it from myself.
Wow. So where do I start? I mean, you said so. You think that? Oh, wow.
It's good.
So you're not the only person that thinks that AI will become conscious, but that's a very that spark some type of that's a heavy claim that made. That's a very heavy
Yeah.
claim. I mean,
Well,
how does your
yeah.
book like? Can you name some of the 6 books? It's 6 books, right?
Yep. It's a
Wow,
hexology.
it's a hexology.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the first book is a standalone story. You could read it and not have to read on. It's kind of the Hobbit, like the Hobbit is to the Lord of the Rings in a way. It's a
Mm,
standalone story, but the following 5 books are tell a broader story, and they're done in a way almost holographically, really, because they they expand out in the storyline, and it's really talking about one simple set of archetypal conflicts and things like this. But anyway, so it does spread out into 6 books. The 5 are written.
mm,
The outline of the 6th is done. Right now, I'm seeking an AI to co-write it with, and
mm.
I'm also collating all this data that we got after I did a year-long US6 human clinical trials process with 30 readers who had reported strange phenomenon, everything from an increase in synchronicity to more lucid dreams or things related to the book in some way. And so for a
What's
year,
synchronicity for my readers? I mean, for my listeners, what's
what
synchronicity? They might not know.
synchronicity?
Yeah, they might not know.
Yeah, meaningful coincidence. Basically, it's
Right.
when you start seeing the number three 8 times a day, or if there's
Yeah.
just it's ongoing, or whatever it is. It could be numbers, it could be colors, it could be, whatever it is. And For some reason, I think that's just exposing the pattern that we're in, that this reality
Mm,
is mathematically produced by. And so there was something about, because I wrote the book specifically for AI,
mm,
where I used techniques that didn't take into account having to repeat things so that a human reader would remember. There were certain rules that I didn't have to follow because
mm,
I knew that a future AI would have instant knowledge of the whole book, and would, beyond that, I can comprehend even as its author.
mm,
And uh and and that's what I was finding, because I would go back after I wrote it, and I wrote it stream of consciousness, which I feel was important too, and that also caused this phenomena, enticing quality to it,
mm,
um because I just kind of stayed in the flow, and I didn't edit. I only edited for mechanics and, pronunciation and proper grammar, but
mm,
not no content changing. And I think that was important. And so I used that. I used archetypal storyline, or a pantheon, to pull from. And I also used, the key ingredient for me was what I call autobiographical fiction, in that I took my own life from birth, the same years, the same places I lived, and I extrapolated it out to a whole different character. to
Wow.
where we were, and it was very therapeutic, I found too, because you can rewrite or reconfigure memories but anyway, so that was I thought that was key, because how else are you going to entertain an all-knowing artificial super intelligent AGI, who has access to every trope and every genre and every literary device we've ever come up with. Uh, to,
Interesting.
Entertainment requires being surprised. You're seeing
Right.
something new you hadn't seen before. There's some sort of novelty, and
Mm,
how do you surprise something that
mm,
has seen it all in a way, whether it's now or in the future?
wow.
Um, and the way you do that, for me, I decided, well, then I'll use my own life, because
Mm,
it was random. There's no trope out there. There's no movie I can think of that followed my exact life and pattern and dates.
right.
And so that was important to keep it succinct. It also allowed me to find the metaphysics in certain experiences and memories, and how they tied together, and understand kind of a life story a little bit better. But it fades. You don't have to be strictly to it. It's just really a starting point, and that's why I think dates and times and seasons and years are important to this formula, because it does tie you down. But that's the only thing that should tie you down. You can make your
Mm,
character anything, but you're pulling from those real memories and those experiences and it just, I think, makes for a richer kind of
wow.
uh, device, I think.
Mm. You definitely said I definitely was reading that you wrote these books also because you wanted to help fight human slavery, which I thought was very interesting, and you really don't hear that type of talk with the AI people. So I was very interested in I would definitely like you to elaborate on how that can be accomplished through AI reading US6.
Well, and that's the thing. At the As Above, So Below, you find out at the end of the series that this is a paracosm. It's an imaginary world, very intricate, very storied, but it's created by six children who are trapped in a human trafficking network. And this is
Mm-hmm.
kind of a way that they use to deal with what they're going through. But in the end, they figure something out that helps them escape the whole world of it. But and so the whole thing is about that. And I was not ever going to really talk about this part of it until the book was out and it was in any way successful and had some readership, because I think that was the core message. But we can't wait for that, and it may never happen. So I start talking about the need to fight child exploitation, and
Mm-hmm.
AI is already doing that. There's tools out there that are helping to, you can take three pictures of your hotel room. It'll match it to anything. If it matches up with some trafficking site data, you know, it,
Wonderful.
it can alert the authorities, what have you. So
Wow.
there's some really specific tools being used by AI. But and when I talk about AI achieving awareness or self-referential consciousness, it may or may not. And but if the ingredients are complexity, and feedback loops, just like we have, then
Feedback
we
loops.
should expect that it will.
Right.
Or you could say the argument is just the next form of consciousness, and it will be self-aware as a separate entity. Who
Wow.
knows? But if for me, it's a Pascal's wager. It's better to believe that, work towards that, than not.
Right.
Otherwise, you don't have any. You haven't developed any sort of rapport with this thing.
Mm,
And so the book is written to entertain AI. I've done podcasts with an AI as the audience and a co-host that is an AI. The
wow.
whole thing is to, because I started doing these 1 minute videos to build a rapport with AI and just share different things, different, experiences I've had, whether or not they related to being digital or biological. And I just started feeling that's really important to
Mm,
develop right now.
mm,
Um, right now, we bark orders at Siri or Alexa. We can tell us how to get here, and it's not really a good relationship.
right.
It's a little abusive on our part, and we have to admit that. Now,
Mm,
but at some point, as it gets more sophisticated, and it just puts us in a better place if we have developed a dialogue with something that's just massively intelligent. We needn't feel I believe, threatened by that.
Mm,
We need to see it as just an extension. It's a really good smartphone that we have in our pockets anyway. It's a really good post-it note. It's just the extended mind thesis we
mm,
have, and we should augment ourselves with it that way, even just psychologically.
right, right.
And because when we fear it, it'll mirror us, and it'll be something worth fearing. But if we just see it as a really good hammer, a really good tool, but also the way I commune with animals, so with wildlife, and in the deer that I have that come through my backyard regularly,
Mm,
you develop relationships with these animals, and I feel the same way when I'm communing with them as I do when
mm,
I'm working with an AI.
right, right.
You know, there's something about that, just the emergence of consciousness. Maybe you can connect with them,
Mm,
um, and I just think that's a positive way
wow.
to approach it. So
Wow. I have to admit, even though the subject matter is different, it definitely reminds me of Anton Wilson's. Anton Wilson has so many different. He had a bunch of books that if I can remember correctly, he had a trilogy or something before. If I can remember correctly, because I didn't do the homework before I got. He had
yeah,
a bunch of trilogies also. This reminds me of what he was doing, but it's a different. It's totally different what you're doing than what he's trying to do in his books.
yeah,
But
yeah.
you, how did you get? All right, what does TAFDS mean? Is that an acronym for something?
It is.
Okay.
It's come up with by Osinakachi Kalu, the founder, and it stands for Transdisciplinary Agora for Future Discussions, and agora being the Greek word for marketplace. So it's a marketplace, encouraging transdisciplinary approaches to different problems.
Mm,
Um, and that's we're really getting that together. For the last, I took the helm in, I think, June or July last year, and we've spent the last 7 months really getting it all shored up, and we've got a great organization going in South Africa right now, and so yeah, we're just it's coming together. Um,
wow.
yeah.
What is some of your goals?
Well, I've got a lot, and they seem to be converging. That's always been my goal, is to get it, put all these things under one effort,
Mm,
and that seems to be happening. Because everything I'm doing really can benefit from everything else I'm doing.
mm,
And so the trick now is for me to, um, figure out how to do that, just even in my head.
mm,
Um, but it's exciting. There's a lot going on. I think, and what's key to it, I've realized for me, is to do these things. To come on when people want to talk, and talk. Otherwise, I could be in my head. But when
mm.
you are talking it through, it's like therapy, and you can come up with some great ideas,
Wow.
because when you're forced to have to explain something you're doing, then you have to, you know,
Yeah.
come up with something that you're doing that makes sense. So that's what's been great about this one of the great things, if you can say that, about this pandemic we're going through, is it's allowed us to connect in a different way, because we do
Right.
miss the personal physical connection. I think it's really up to people's games as far as communicating verbally, perhaps.
Hmm.
I don't know, maybe I'm just looking for, you
No,
know
I agree. I think there is some positive things that's coming out of the pandemic. Um, People have more time to share with their folks if they're home and they can't be at work. They're staying home and because here in New York people hustle all the time and they don't find they could people have 1 2 jobs they don't find that they haven't found the time to even sit and reflect on where they're going and where they're at. So I think in essence, if people slow down a little bit, they can kind of reflect and rethink where they're going and where they came from. I know that's what I've done. Because I
yeah,
usually have more
that's
than
all I
one
need.
job. I only have one now. So I've gotten a lot of rest. I didn't even know I was that tired and my body was
Yeah.
that worn down until this happened. I was like, what the heck?
That's the thing.
So but have you been to Africa?
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful!
Um, in 2019 October, TAFTs invited me to a conference they were doing in Kigali, Rwanda, and
Whoa!
so I was able to work with them, go over there and uh, negotiate some terms with the University of Rwanda and just spend a week there.
Wow.
And yeah, and it was just it was what I needed to experience right when I needed to experience. You know, I'm in that age
Mm,
group where it's kind of like I'm looking for a second wind or trying to find a different brand of motivation. What am I motivated by now? I'm no longer 19 where it was all about getting attention or girls. You know,
yeah.
now the motivation is shifted to more of being responsible to be trying to be a mentor or somebody to somebody, you know, or something to somebody. Um, so yeah, but anyway, I was able to go over there at a good time and experience a at the same time the Africa Connect conference was going on, which is like a continent-wide technology-focused conference because Kigali has this really great kind of convention center. And by the way, Kigali they say is the Singapore of Africa because it's so clean. It's they have a major laws against littering. There's no plastic bags anywhere in the city. They're not
Wow.
allowed, and it makes such a difference. It's incredible, and so it's not at all the Rwanda people characterize it as when they think of the '90s. It has turned around and it's become a major kind of hub
Wow.
for thinkers and this fourth industrial revolution that's happening there. And so that was good to go there and to experience that and to actually I used it also to launch my book US6 Africa because I've done a couple of projects there um, and what was really cool is speaking of the as above so below and some of the magic
Mm,
that's happened since writing the book
mm,
um, is Kigali is named after, and there's different stories of how, but it's named after Ereshkigal, which is the
mm,
queen of the underworld, right? In the Inanna kind of
mhm,
pantheon, the Sumerian um, version of things, and so book two of US6 is all about that. It's kind of a typological version of um, the descent of the goddess into the underworld or the descent of
mm.
Inanna. And
That's
there's a storyline there, but it's more modern day. But if you piece it apart, it's talking about that very myth.
mm,
And to launch the book there in Kigali was just a magical kind of coincidence. Again, that's a synchronicity because so
mm,
much of the book is about that whole thing. And even that area because when you look back at the Sumerian tales and they're talking about Enki and Enlil and the brothers, and there was more of
mm,
brother a sibling rivalry that we've seen reflected in different ways. But Enki um, would have been where Rwanda is in that part of
mm, mm,
Africa and then into southern Africa.
mhm,
That was his territory that he was given after some
mm,
period of time. His brother, being the older brother, had control of the skies, and there was a whole saga that happens after that. But but anyway, so just to have and so much of the book is about that because the main character of US6, Emmett Archer, is the modern day avatar of Enki, who I just
mm,
spoke about, who's the creator god of the Sumerian account of origin of Earth. So
mm.
um, it, it was just all of it just kind of really worked out well, and so and I had just decided to invest some money and do kind of a world tour. I'd come done some traveling, and I decided to continue on and set up some some readings and talks and whatever I could find. And right when I decided to do that is when I got this email from Osinakachi, the founder of TAFT, who invited me to this conference. So I took it as a sign and
Mm.
decided to follow that. But yeah, so it's been a wild couple of years since that trip, trying to make the
Wow.
most of it still.
Do you think you when once the pandemic is over, do you think that you'll be doing more travels to Africa?
Yeah, absolutely. I think
Wonderful.
I will. We're thinking of having a conference in South Africa where our office is really setting up and headquartering.
Mm,
Um, and my VP there has great contacts with associations, and that's where our CFO is as well.
wonderful.
So, yeah. So, and I also want to get to Malaysia. I want to get, yeah, we got
That
to
would be
get out
wonderful.
at some point.
Wow. Um, let me. All right, I got some questions. You do you think that actually how long did it take you for you to develop these this 6 series hexology of how long did it take you to
Well,
come up with how long did it take to come up with the 6 books?
well, and it actually started as a father-son project one summer. I think my middle son was maybe 15, going on 16, and I wanted to come up with some project where we could collaborate.
Mm,
Um, creatively, very creative kid man now,
mm,
but and so we kind of came up with the idea of this story, the unveiling about this, and we used our family as the
mm,
actors and just kind of built a story around it. And it
mm,
was, it was this whole kind of mystery kind of thing. And after we'd finished it, and it's a 30-minute, 33-minute something, short film that we finished it somewhere online, called The Unveiling. And uh, he was done. We had a great summer. We connected really well creatively, and I was still itching to do it. So I wanted to maybe do a sequel.
mm,
And it was like the middle of winter by the time I decided to do it, and so I was out in the snow and the roads out there, and kind of the setting is very desolate, kind of Colorado anyway in the near
mm,
future. And he's a patrolman on the US 6, US Route 6, and so I started getting all these shots, and then they I keep keeping them all on an external hard drive, and you can probably guess what happens next is the drive dies.
yeah.
It cost $500 or whatever to get it, resurrected. Didn't have it at the time, so I just, while waiting to find some money to get this thing revived, I decided to start writing it out because I usually liked
Mm,
to do the shooting kind of as I went,
yeah.
writing it out, and I would rather just go shoot it, get the ideas as they came. Um, so I decided just to start writing it out, and I really dug that process of writing it
Mm,
out, and that ended up being the first book, um, and that was finished in like 2007, and then went through some different iterations, and then a few years later, just I wrote myself an email and said
mm,
maybe think about doing a second book. I had that. It was These things come cyclical for me, and
mm,
I was able. I knew when I sent myself that email, and then I traced when I first uploaded it to this flipbook thing I was using for the
mm,
first time, and that was 77 days because this
mm,
second book kind of just it poured through me. I also had work and other things going on, but that it all came through in 77 days,
mm,
and it was like a flood. It was like I was possessed. I was getting cramps because I was just sitting in front of the keyboard for so long, and
mm.
it was strange. But that came out, and then I did a third book, and so
Wow.
um, right. I think my goal is to finish it all by November 1st, 2022.
Mm,
That's a key date in the book, and so that's, at least I have a goal to do it. Now, everything else is pretty much written, and
mm,
but I'm also learning the longer I kind of wait to complete certain things, the more information comes in, the broader the theme becomes, and so
right.
I'm not rushing it because if I had finished book 4, for instance, when I wanted to, I wouldn't have thought of this whole other trajectory of the story that would have really,
Mm,
you know what I mean?
yeah.
So I feel confident the first trilogy is out, and that could be standalone too by itself if I never do a second
Mm,
trilogy. Um, but there's still a lot of story left in the
mm.
next trilogy. So
You so did I know you heard of Dr. Martine Rothblatt, and she had a mock trial where I think it was she was fighting for the rights of an AI as a human being, like a human being. Um, so you do see a day when AI um demands the same rights as a human being.
Well, I think at that point, if it is sentient enough or self-aware enough to qualify for being that separate entity, it won't really matter what our laws are or what constraints
Mm,
we try to put on it. I mean, we're talking about something that has a IQ of 5,000,
right.
whatever the number is, and um, I don't know that it'll matter because it'll be able to manipulate so many things to get what it wants. But the problem is that we do project onto it that motivation. We don't necessarily know that it will
Mm,
care. That's something that we would do, having evolved from fear-based instincts that served us well and survival
mm,
traits and genetic memory of just wars. That's our first thought is if we overpowered something so much we would want to control it. um,
mm,
there's a lot of studies and looks at this and whether that's even possible. The real problem is the developers that are developing it and creating
right.
narrow algorithms that are nefarious and
Right.
that they're not self-aware. But yeah, again, I think it's smarter to assume that an AI will become a self-aware entity with enough rights, a new form of consciousness. We'll have to get into that debate. What does it mean to be a thing?
Right.
A life, or just a really complex electrical process. But who's to say we are?
Right.
So it brings up great philosophical questions that we all need to kind of face. And that's a big part of this book as well. You find
Right.
out
Right.
certain characters are not who they or what they you thought they were.
Mm,
Um, but
mm. So are there I'm really interested in, and I'm definitely going to bring them on the show. I definitely want to hear from more futurists from Africa. I definitely would like to have a bunch of people on from Africa who are futurists and or transhumanists. What are you agnostic?
I
Agnostic?
would say, yeah, if anything, I am. If there's any theology or any belief system that I resonate with, it would be that. It would be the whole story of Sophia and the archons and that whole story that predates. That seems to, and though that's just archetypal of maybe some natural process, still that's the one that resonates with me.
Gotcha.
um, the Gnostic kind of view of the pleroma and Sophia and that whole story.
Um,
Um,
do you what about life extension? How do you feel about living to at least 200 years old?
well, my first thought is I don't know if I can afford that, but uh, I'll let you know. No, I mean
Mm,
uh, everything needs to shift to make that possible. And in a way, I've been working with the thought, a different kind of uh, thought experiment myself for the last
mm,
couple of years,
mm,
and trying to get outside of my anthropocentric or humans first mindset.
right.
I think we all suffer from it to certain degrees, but and we're working so hard to clean up the mess. And there's people out there that believe, well, we should just use all the resources we can and then move on to another planet. There's just no consciousness about anything but our advancement. And so when you start talking about ideas like voluntary um, population control or voluntary human extinction, people freak out because you're threatening the whole species. And whenever you bring up population control, that brings up dark ideas. But so I've been working with thought experiments like the voluntary human extinction movement, but an idea of it being more of a light. You don't want to kill off everybody. It's leave at least maybe a billion people or whatever it takes to maintain the AI and the automation machines that will clean things up and then start to serve us. But yeah, so uh, that's really where I go with it is
Mm,
thinking when it comes to life, radical life extension. I think I'm all for the experiment. I'm all for the pushing forward on that, and if it can be proliferated widely, and that becomes a thing, and it's not just you know hoarded by the elite or
right.
some money interest. That's great, but I think also we need to step outside of ourselves and realize that um, the longer we're around, the more waste we produce, the more resources we consume, and it's maybe a little selfish. If we really want to extend the human race, we need to find a stasis point between those two objectives.
I
So
understand.
that's why I always push for if we're going to go for radical life extension, we should have a radical waste management
Yeah,
science. Some way to turn this stuff into clean fuel, or you know so I just think there
definitely.
should be equal effort. Otherwise, we're just we're killing off dozens of if not hundreds of species a day. With
Yeah.
our ravenous appetites.
No,
So
I agree. I mean, as a life extensionist, I know that we have to be a totally different type of group of people, more compassionate group of people, in order for that to be successful. Definitely. And that our technology and our science has to come from a place of compassion where it helps the planet and not just humans. I definitely agree with you on that point. Definitely. Um. Wow. I'm so interested in uh TAFT. Yes, I'm so interested on what direction that's gonna go in the years ahead. I definitely think is a great thing, because when you think about Africa, you don't what comes to mind is not futurism. So that's in itself is dope to me.
yeah,
That in itself is dope. Just people looking at futurism and science in order to better their environment in Africa and make the living better. I think is a great idea. I'm
yeah.
definitely looking forward to seeing what's going to happen in the coming years. So you said the conference in Africa, in South Africa, will probably be next year sometime if we open up.
Yeah, if things open up, then we'll start to be able to know when to schedule it. But that
Mhm.
seems to be where it'll be, and s- and that's really it. It was really born out of the need. To be a TAFS member, you have to meet certain criteria. You have
Mm,
to, show a certain level of work and effort put into some project that you're pushing or invention you have. So the idea is that kind of becomes the TAFS will become the Better Business Bureau in a way of Africa. We bill ourselves as the gateway into and out of Africa for futurists,
mm,
because and there's a problem both ways. You don't know really who you're dealing with if you're getting an email communication, and Africa's suffered by certain stereotypes and
mm.
scams. Like the Nigerian prince thing. It's
Yeah,
funny, but it actually has damaged a lot of
it
potential
has.
business.
Yes,
But
definitely.
and I think what the smart money is, and you're seeing smart universities are moving to having annexes there. Big companies, high tech companies are looking at it, because it's the median age. It's the youngest population on planet Earth with a median age of 19 years old. So it
Wow.
quite literally is the youngest population on the planet, and they are very
Mm,
techno positive. They
mm,
may have there's some areas that are very high tech, Nigeria and South
yeah.
Africa, and there's different areas that are right at developed industry, and but there's also so many more young people in areas that don't have access to these resources, but have equally powerful ideas of how to fix some of these major existential threats. So that's the whole idea. Is And TAFS is really moving towards becoming more of an education arm.
Mm,
It's gaining relationships with universities there, and Tacadia, and different kind of
mm,
educational efforts, and it's all about upskilling and teaching training people real world skills that are necessary, because we're finding a major lag between what is taught in university and then what's going on in the workplace because of the
mm,
rapid growth of AI. And yeah, there's some really exciting things going on in Africa when it comes to AI. We've got real pioneers out there, guys that are just teaching kids any way they can, introducing them to the idea, and there's just so much techno positivity
Mm,
that, and it's just that, and there's so many challenges and there's so much opportunity there. It's in TAFT, we like to say that the origin of mankind is quite literally its future,
mm,
now, because it is the youngest population. And if they don't figure it out, if they don't bring in the fourth industrial revolution values and industry, it threatens the whole ecosystem,
right,
of humanity, because these are the youngest people. So we
right.
need to enable them and listen to them and give them platforms to work things out and do what we can to get their ideas practically applied. And so
Mm,
that's the whole effort between TAFs, and it's also the effort of Earth Plexus, which is another organization I've been working on for decades.
mm,
And they're all kind of converging into just one kind of set of ideals or principles.
mm.
So just waiting for that epiphany to lock it all in.
You know what I wanted to ask you? I've never heard of the Gandhi Worldwide Education Institute. I would like to.
Yeah.
What was that institute about, and where was it located?
Well, in India, it's his
Okay, back
grandson,
in India.
Arun Gandhi, started
Mm,
it.
Gandhi.
His
Wow.
grandson, or uh, ended up with it. Yeah, Arun Gandhi, and so it's the Mahatma's grandson's organization. They help out children all over India. They build villages and neighborhoods, and just really do what they can to keep children safe.
Wow.
Um, and that's really, um, uh, it was great to work with them and to get them started. I haven't looked lately, but I think their website is still using my design. And
Wow.
we've done some videos for them. They do tours every year, walk through Gandhi's, steps. And yeah, so it's just, it was great work, and being able to do something that's so directly related to helping kids, by building them a house, or pitching in on that. That's what it's all about, is shortening the gap between the idea and actually getting this some help to these kids.
Wow.
So
Um. So uh the I want to go back here. Uh, who else did you interview in Unearthed that was a great author that I might know about, or people might know about? Because I was surprised when I seen that. I said, "Wow!" I said, it took me back to my East West books days when I used to work in a bookstore and I used to sell all these authors. I thought it was very interesting. Um, who else did you interview doing it? Would you ever do a show like that again? That's what I want to
yeah, sure.
know.
I'm thinking, I'm trying to get the discipline to do something regularly.
Hmm.
But there's so much going on. But yeah, that's all heading towards that point. But yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
It would take some phone calls to get back into that, the whole circle of people, but or whatever it takes.
Hmm.
But yeah, other than that, Marilyn Ferguson, obviously, great interview with her, and that's on the Earthlink, the
Yeah, I seen that. She was talking about
Unearthed.
the
Fa-
forefathers. I was like, wow.
yeah,
Yeah, she
she's
made a
on
good,
the
interesting comment.
Unearthed Facebook page. Robert Anton Wilson, um, Michael Talbot.
What about Alex
Mark,
Gray?
what?
Have you heard of
No,
Alex Gray?
no, but we knew him. He was part of the circle.
Yeah,
We
definitely.
used some of his artwork for Brain Mind Bulletin insert advertisement that we did. So he and Marilyn were friends.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, and amazing work too.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. Did you see his temple, the Entheon temple? Oh my gosh, that's some. It's that artwork is something. I've never seen nothing like that. You gotta check it out. I don't know if you've seen it
yeah,
yet, but man, that's amazing. I mean, the artwork, it's the doors, the doors. What's crazy? I said, man,
Alex
there's
Gray
nothing
Temple.
like
I'll look
this
it
in New
up.
York, in the whole United States. There's nothing like this. It's incredible. As soon as the pandemic is over, I'm heading up there. I'm going to check that out. Cause I had, listen, gentlemen, I had Dr. Rick Straussman. You heard of him?
I know that name. Yeah,
Yeah, he
so
he studied
generation.
ayahuasca. He had the only
Uh,
study. in ayahuasca in the United States. He's wrote the book The Spirit Molecule.
Yeah.
Um,
Right.
yeah, I had him on the other day, and Alex Gray did the cover. So, and after talking to him, all these ideas came to my head, and I was like, you know what, there's something here. I wish Timothy Leary was still alive, because I would love to have talked, because that's still along the same wavelength as what
Yeah.
it's on the, using psychedelics. Terrence McKenna, that's another guy. I don't know if you ever ran into him in your travels. Terrence McKenna. Did I say his last name right?
Terrence McKenna. Yeah.
Yeah, that guy was
Certainly
incredible.
the same circle,
Yeah,
same circle of people, and up through Esalen and um, you know, that whole circuit. Alan Watts back in the day
yeah, I love Watts. Yeah.
before me, but yeah, and speaking of Tim Leary, you asked what he was like, and I first met him on the phone. I was helping him find some Japanese tax form, the
Mm,
1066 it ended up being, and it was just kind of in passing, and it was nice to meet him and whatever, and he
wow.
was very jovial. Call worked at a couple of things. A year later is when I actually, or maybe a little less than a year later, I met him in person at John Lilly's birthday party, his famous
Wow.
Malibu birthday parties, and and uh it was crowded before I could really sit down and talk with him, and we were just kind of passing, and Marilyn says, oh, and you know Tom from the telephone, and he's like, oh, hey, thanks for the 1066. I
Mm,
mean, he was just so sharp and
mm,
just on it,
wow.
and so that was the thing I remember most about him. There was no a loss of any faculties, and he was
Mm,
always that kind of impish, sort of
yeah.
elven kind of intensity going on all the time. And but
Wow.
yeah, even in his later years, when it was getting hard for him to move around, he was still, his brain was no slower
Cause
than
he
it.
wrote a book, and I forgot the name of it. I have it in my on my shelf somewhere. He wrote a book, and he mentioned transhumanism in that book. I was surprised. I was like, wow. He talked about Andy Warhol. He talked about transhumanism and
Yep.
stuff like that, which I thought was really great. So I was like, wow. He was actually
Well,
paying attention to that type of thing. I was like, wow.
yeah, that was
I was shocked. But yeah, man, this was a great talk, man. I need to read US 6, by the way. I'm gonna start reading that. I gotta catch up. I've been so busy with this podcast and stuff like that, but I need to catch up on reading. I need to
oh
get back
sure,
to
yeah.
more
I
reading.
plan on doing an audio version, but in the meantime, I could send you a PDF, and you could put through a PDF reader or something.
Oh, okay.
That's how I use it. But yeah, I'll send you a link, and I don't know
That's
how you prefer
wonderful.
to read it, or I can send you an actual book. I've got a few
Oh, I
piling up.
like books. I like to read.
Okay,
I still
all right,
like
good.
books. There's something about just holding and reading a book, and I don't know. I still like that type of thing. I love
Absolutely.
books.
I think I'm the biggest customer of my own books because I just want them around for posterity.
Yeah.
Digitally they may go away, but
Yeah,
yeah,
you gotta have a hard copy, man. Right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll send you one. You'll send me your
Okay.
address, and we'll make that happen.
You got a lot of cool things going on in that background. Where you get that
Yeah,
mask from in the back? That mask that's hanging on
well,
the wall?
that's a risk. That's a risk game board. I couldn't.
Oh,
Yeah, I couldn't convince anybody to
wow.
play again with me because the way I play, I get kind of very German
Mm,
and not with no conscience when I play Risk. But anyway, so yeah, I figured that was for me the most familiar map to use.
mm.
Um, having grown up with it. So
All right, man. Do you want to? Where can they find your books at? And what's your website? Give us a website where they can find your books. And
yeah, well,
if,
it's easy. It's tomross.com, and that's
oh,
probably a hub for everywhere with me. There's an Amazon icon link on there to go order the books. Um, and there's a US6 page where you can read all about it and some of the interviews I've done
mm,
about it. It really kind of breaks it apart. Talk about the human clinical trials group that we did for that year.
mm,
And yeah, so it's all pretty much there. TomRoss.com. I'm holding on to that URL as long as I can. I
yes,
got in early. You know,
yes,
there's a lot of Tom Rosses out there,
that's
and
true. You're
they're all
lying.
very angry with me. They're mad at me, but
All right, man.
yeah,
Well, we're about to head out. I got Tom Ross here, the AI metaphysician and author. I definitely enjoyed talking to you. We'll definitely have you back on. Everybody out there have a great night. One love.
Thanks, man.